Hello and welcome to the Unconventional Podcast. I'm Grace Hardy and today we have a very special guest, Caroline Hardy, my mother. Welcome.
Thank you, darling.
It's so lovely to have you on.
And it's so lovely to see you.
So you are the person that actually introduced me to apprenticeships in the first place. And if it wasn't for you, we actually wouldn't be sitting here today.
Well, that's very sweet. I think probably I shouldn't take too much of the credit, but yes, I'll accept that.
And so why did you think that an apprenticeship would be a good thing for me? Because I know at school I wasn't the best student. I struggled a lot and I knew that university wasn't really for me, but I didn't really know what any other options were.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was quite lucky in the fact that I hadn't gone to university when I left school. In the dark ages, obviously, because I studied nursing, and at that time in the 80s, it was run in schools of nursing. And my mother, your grandmother, always told me that I wasn't clever enough to go to university, which obviously made me feel splendid. I went on to get a degree and I went on to get my master's, but during the time that I was working, so I did both at the same time. And I certainly fully focused on the idea of university because it does suit some people, but it doesn't necessarily suit everyone. I knew from the way that you had struggled at school, it wasn't necessarily the best system for you as an individual. But I was also lucky enough at the time to be running an apprenticeship at a university. And so I really understood about apprenticeships and actually felt very, very strongly that they were ideal for some people and some careers. And so I think that's when I said to you, why don't we think about you working? I also knew how important it was for you to be financially independent, that you'd worked since you were 16 and you really liked that financial independence. And so for me, apprenticeships made sense for you because it was that working, earning, but also learning. And the one thing you might remember I did say to you was, you don't have to go to university, but you do need to get a qualification. And I felt that more strongly than going to university. But there are different ways to get other qualifications.
No, and I think that's so important because not everyone knows about them. When you told me about apprenticeships, I remember going to my careers advisor and asking what level apprenticeship should I be doing. And he turned around and he said, there are levels. And at that point, I knew that my school wasn't really equipped to help me navigate the world of apprenticeships because they clearly had not done it before. And he didn't really know what they were to begin with. So then it was back to asking you questions and also researching for myself.
Yeah, and do you remember we went to that careers day?
Yeah, careers fair somewhere.
Yeah, in Cheltenham, I think.
Racecourse, it was lovely. It was really nice.
And I learned quite a lot then as well, because obviously I'd been focused on healthcare apprenticeships, which I knew you wouldn't want to do because you can't stand the sight of blood. So for me, again, I learned quite a lot from that day. I think at the time we were sort of erring on PR for you.
We were going for project management.
We were, weren't we?
Yeah.
And I thought that might have been quite a good fit, but we did learn quite a lot from that day, I felt, just talking to other people who were there.
Definitely, and like the split between working and learning was really interesting because some people do it one day a week, other people do it in blocks, and it really just depends on your employer, which was interesting because it was not something I knew about before.
In my experience, we have the apprentices in one day a week throughout the university.
So going on to your apprenticeship that you were a training provider for.
Yes.
What was the name of the apprenticeship and what level was it?
So it was the Nursing Associate Higher Apprenticeship and it was a level 4. It was over 2 years, I think probably 27 months with the EPA at the end. And so we worked with local NHS employers, local mental health and learning disability employers, as well as care homes and nursing homes as well.
And I think it's really important to mention that a lot of your students were mature students, so they weren't necessarily those 16 to 18-year-olds that you find out of school.
No, the main reason for that was that we did ask them to come with some sort of experience, because the notion of being a nursing associate, which is a role that sits between a healthcare assistant and a registered nurse, requires those apprentices to have some experience, ideally as a healthcare assistant. So some of them had been healthcare assistants for 3, 4, 5 years. But, you know, a lot of them had been healthcare assistants for 10, 15, even 20 years. And when you deal with mature students, mature apprentices, there are particular issues, concerns that they have, I think.
Definitely. Before you were involved in the apprenticeship yourself, did you know about the benefits of apprenticeships? Had you heard of them? Did you think they had a good reputation or not?
No, I knew almost nothing about it at all. I'd taught undergraduate and postgraduate nursing for quite a number of years, and then I taught on the foundation degree for the nursing associate practitioner, which again was a sort of in-between role between the healthcare assistant and the registered nurse, but it wasn't a professional qualification. That was what was lacking. And so we were one of I think we might have been the first programme to actually run at the university where I worked. So it was very much kind of learn on the job for me as well.
Yeah, so what sort of challenges did you face being the first people to sort of offer this apprenticeship?
The rest of the university didn't understand apprenticeships at all.
Did you face quite a lot of resistance from them because of that?
Yes, they tried to fit us into the university academic year. And that was a real challenge because it doesn't lend itself to semester 1, semester 2, and then a pretend semester 3. They work over the whole year because obviously they're employed. So they are apprentices throughout, but they work outside of university times as well. And I think that there was a fantastic group of staff who I was lucky enough to work with, but also who worked and understood apprenticeships, and they were in a more technical role, looking at how to work general apprenticeships into a university system. And so really we sort of learned from them. And I remember having just a huge amount of laughter in meetings because they were going, we don't understand what you need, and I was going, but I don't understand what apprenticeships are and I need to do this for the NMC, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, and they say, well, we need to do this for the apprenticeship programme and recognition. So we sort of learnt on the job together really, which perhaps wasn't ideal, but it brought us very much closer. It enabled me to get a real thorough understanding of apprenticeships and how to bring them with some flexibility into the university.
Which must be such a struggle because obviously a university is very regimented and it's very different to apprenticeships. Apprenticeships usually run the whole year through unless you've got a bank holiday or annual leave, whereas university, again, does have semester 1, semester 2 and usually a very small semester 3.
Yes, and where I worked, there sort of was this pretend semester 3 that didn't really exist from May to July. Apart from nursing programmes, I think, or healthcare programmes, no other faculties in the university had this semester 3. And so it became a very important semester because obviously we were asking the apprenticeships to hand work in and we had to mark it and it had to go to exam board and be ratified in a time frame that didn't really exist for the university.
Yeah. What do you think? Obviously, you've spoken about potentially some of the struggles mature students have.
Yeah.
So what do you think those main ones are?
I think the biggest one is a lack of confidence. Are usually extremely experienced work-wise. And so they bring so many skills and they don't really realise how many skills they bring with them. And part of my job and my team's job really was to remind them and be able to say to them, look how much experience you've already brought with you and we can use that experience hugely. But I think a lot of them had, shall I say, poor school experience. There were a lot of them who we were able to identify as dyslexic or who had dyspraxia because the university I was at was very supportive of that and did good assessments for that. And quite a number of them did say that actually if they'd known that during their school, perhaps it would have been different, but they were just thought of as stupid.
Yeah.
And so their school experience I think anybody's school experience has a really big impact on how you see yourself. And so coming into a university where they never thought they would be, many of them had not done A-levels, or some of them had done O-levels or GCSEs. Some hadn't done that. And so it really was about, 99% of my job, apart from the teaching, was about supporting them. You can teach someone to write an essay, yes, and to pass. And it was about being able to do that, but also bring their experience in to that academic writing.
And I think what you said about support is really important, because at the moment, the dropout rate for apprenticeships is too high.
We started it in 2017, 2018, was about 50%. We had a 30% dropout rate. So although it wasn't fantastic, I think we felt that we were getting to the point of being able to support them.
I started my career studying for the AAT qualification whilst working as an accounting apprentice. I've seen firsthand the value that apprentices bring to the workplace. If you're a business looking to develop or grow your finance function, it's a no-brainer. You'll be developing motivated, enthusiastic employees who learn practical skills whilst gaining a formal qualification. You can hire apprentices to study an AAT qualification while they work, or upskill your existing employees. Plus, there's funding available to cover your training costs. To find out more on why apprenticeships make great business sense and how to get started, go to aat.org.uk/unconventional.
And keep them focused and really engaged in that apprenticeship.
No, and I think that's so important, and you clearly did a very good job of it, so well done.
Thank you, darling.
What do you think the main benefits of a mature student going into an apprenticeship?
I think their experience, and not only their job experience, but their life experience. They bring so much. A lot of them have got families. A lot of them have done a number of different jobs. A lot of them have really, really good people skills, whatever you want to call it, communication skills, particularly in nursing, across the board healthcare professions. It is fundamental to be able to have and form those relationships with patients, with colleagues, with family and carers. And you have to do that very quickly. And that's a real skill. And I think that they really bought that. And I think it helped them as a cohort to actually gel, because they became very supportive of each other, kind of in peer relationships. They thought it was all very funny, but they started a WhatsApp group. Quite a number of them had never been on WhatsApp before, but they managed to set it up. And so they had that support from each other. And I think, again, that's really important, because it's fine to have support from your lecturers, etc. And it's a different type of support to have from your peers, because they understand what you're going through.
Yeah, I think that's so true. For me, obviously, there wasn't very many 18-year-old apprentices when I started at my company, and so there was a bit of lack of community. Fortunately, I got on very well with the other younger apprentices, but there was such a big age gap between me and then the next cohort, for example. So that was something I definitely found quite challenging. And so it's nice when you're a mature student to have that cohort, and I'm sure you're all going through the same life experiences as well.
But we also did have younger apprentices around sort of 2021 who had different life experience, perhaps didn't have a family, perhaps didn't have a partner, perhaps didn't have a mortgage. Some of them did and some of them didn't, but some of the older ones did and some of them didn't. It almost sort of takes away those barriers, I think, because you're going through the same thing.
Yeah.
And you all bring something different to the party, if you like. I'm not necessarily sure that it needs to be focused around age. I think perhaps around experiences and sharing those experiences and learning from each other.
Definitely, there's been a big uptake in people creating apprentice communities, for example, now.
Oh,
which has been a really lovely idea that I've loved, because I think the only people that understand what you're going through are other apprentices. Again, no matter what your age or industry that you're in, it's a very niche thing to be doing at any age. And so having that support community where everyone understands what you're going through, if you're revising for an exam or you have client deadlines but you also need to revise, or you've got your EPA coming up, all those things are so important that only other apprentices will understand.
Yes, and we tried to really work with that and try and give the apprentices on their day when they were with us, their 1 day a week, time to actually spend time as a big group or smaller groups over COVID as well, which made it much more difficult because obviously we were all online, and so there wasn't that feeling of being able to sit in a room together, which changes things. You know, online teaching is not the same as face-to-face teaching. It was very important that we ensured that they were still getting what they needed, and so we just would do it in a slightly different way. We'd get them to go off and put them into groups online to do some work together.
Did you think that COVID has changed the dropout rate? Did you feel it more in COVID than you did in person? Did that have an effect on the students?
That's an interesting question, actually. I'd not really thought about that. Yes, I think there were people who just couldn't get their head round being at home or wherever they were with their computer, sitting in front of a screen. I'll be honest, it took me, I shut myself away in that little room downstairs to teach, and it took me quite a long time to learn how to do it. And we were sort of thrown into it. We were told a couple of weeks before we were going into lockdown, and we had to come up with teaching prep, deciding how we were going to actually ensure that they got all the information they needed. I think probably COVID did change the dropout rate. The other thing to remember is because they were healthcare assistants learning to be nursing associates, they were caring for people with COVID. And that was, I can't understand how difficult that must have been, but we had to be there to support them with that as well. Some of them got very poorly, but their experiences of caring for people with COVID were life-changing, I think. And then what becomes the focus? What do they need to kind of do first? And our feeling was very much that they had to focus on their job because they have a contract and so they're employed. And in a way, not that the apprenticeship took a back seat, because it didn't and it couldn't do, but we spent a lot of time supporting those students. And again, it would have been nicer to be able to do it face to face, but we weren't allowed to do that. But they had really difficult experiences during that time.
I'm sure.
In work.
What sort of ways did you help support them as a training provider? Because obviously you're not there day to day when they're caring, but when they come to you for university, in what sort of ways did you help support?
We were available to them because we were there face to face. We would put times on our calendars when we were available for one-to-ones. We would also do group support. If they were assigned, we do assignment support in groups or individually. They could always email us with queries about their assignments, queries about what was going on in their practice. One of the key things for me, I think, as programme lead, was ensuring that myself and my team had very good relationships with the employers, that the employers understood what being an apprentice was about. And actually, I have to be honest and say that was probably one of the biggest challenges, was trying to educate the employers and perhaps more importantly the other staff they worked with to ensure they understood what those apprentices needed when they were at work, because they'd seen them very much as perhaps a healthcare assistant, but actually they were no longer a healthcare assistant, they were an apprentice, and that changed their role and their needs, and that took a lot of work.
What were the main sort of backlash you got from the employers? Was it also trying to explain what off-the-job training was as well? Very
much so, and I think at the beginning we struggled with off-the-job because they were so short of staff, there was no off-the-job training. So, they were either with us or they were in their work placement, work area. But we managed to really work with the employers to widen those opportunities, to give them time in other places so that they could learn. I retired in 2021. We'd got it much better, but we hadn't got it completely right. And I think it was the staff's attitude was only starting to change because they got our trained nursing associates in place they finished the apprenticeship, this new role was then understood, and then they could see the value of supporting the healthcare assistant to become an apprentice, to then become a nursing associate.
If you're here because you're interested in a career in finance, there's no better place to turn than AAT. I should know, that's how I started out. Every year, thousands of school leavers, finance professionals, and career changers choose to study AAT qualifications. They come out with a qualification that employers value, increased salary potential, and a wide range of career progression opportunities. Did you know a large number of FTSE 100 CEOs come from an accountancy background? You can study at home or in the classroom. Depending on your circumstances, you may be able to get your studies funded. You can also earn and learn in the workplace as an accounting apprentice. Find out more about careers in finance at aat.org.uk/unconventional. Which is great that they can see the benefits, but it's sort of too little, too late.
I feel more positive about it because you always think that glass is half empty, and I tend to think that glass is half full. You know, we needed to move people's views on. That always takes time. In the NHS or in healthcare, they have such huge amount of other pressures that perhaps other apprenticeships don't have, in terms of lack of staff, very sick patients. So we really had to think about how we were going to do that. I had some really, really good relationships with employers, and I knew they were behind the apprenticeship 100%. There were always people that I could go to and say, look, I think we need to go and meet this person. And actually going face to face and doing meetings with sisters, matrons, ward managers was always much more helpful.
If someone who was also a training provider came to you and said, we're really struggling with getting the employers on board behind apprenticeships, what are 3 things you'd say that they should do?
So if a training provider came to me,
said we're struggling with relationships with employers.
Well, first of all, it's absolutely key, because you won't get any apprentices if you don't have relationships with the employers. I think going out there, educating, I don't like the word educate, but really informing people about what the apprenticeship entails, what it can bring that employer, the advantages, not only a nursing associate at the end of the apprenticeship, but actually through the process of that 2-year apprenticeship. The knowledge that apprentice can bring to the clinical area is really amazing, because they have access to so much more research and skills training. So yes, have I answered that question?
Yeah, you have.
Have I?
Yeah,
Okay.
when I've spoken to other training providers, they've said the same sort of thing. They've also said that bringing like a case study is really, really key as well. So if you're able to go, August did an apprenticeship and she went back into the company and now this is her story and this is how she's been able to help, they find that quite useful as well.
Oh, so I'm afraid I jumped the gun on that, because I would always take an apprentice with me.
And I think that's really important to do so you can hear it.
But why would people listen to me? They know that I want to run the apprenticeship, and it's fine, I can speak quite freely about that, but actually what they want to know is what it was like in real life. And I would always have that relationship with the apprentices saying, you need to really tell them what it's like. It's really hard work. Yes, your lecturers are always on you. Yeah, I think that's a much better point to start off at, rather than saying, oh, it'll be fine and it's really easy and, you know, you'll just be able to
glide
gently.
through.
Yeah. It's not like that at all.
It's not, and I really think people do think apprenticeships are easier than university.
I would totally agree with you, and I learned a huge amount over the years of doing it, and how hard the apprentices had to work.
Yeah, and for me in finance, when I had busy season, it was awful. I'd work till late and then I'd revise.
Yes.
And then I'd go to sleep and I'd wake up and I'd work.
And I remember thinking, you just kept having exams all the time. Because we were quite nice, and the nursing associate apprenticeship was quite a lot of reflective essays. There were essays. There was a science test exam that they had to take. But you just had exam after exam after exam. I did feel really sorry for you, actually.
But you know what? I'm glad I didn't have any of the essays, because that wouldn't have been my strong suit whatsoever.
No, it wouldn't have been your strong suit at all. You have other areas that you are stronger in, shall we say.
Than reading and writing.
Than reading and writing, which are fairly fundamental, but you do have them. But there
Deep
are
down.
other, deep down, yes.
What do you think the career opportunities are for a mature student taking an apprenticeship?
Massive. I think they're absolutely massive. I don't think you should think that age is a barrier. If this is what I really want to do, I would say to anybody, go and do it. I've had quite a few different careers in my life. I started off as a nurse. I then travelled. I then learned how to be a secretary. I then became an office manager. I then did horse riding for the disabled. I then came back and was a community staff nurse, then became a district nurse, and then moved into teaching. And I think, don't let age put you off anything. The oldest apprentice I ever had was 63. Okay? So my age. And he was brilliant. And his employer was totally supportive of him because of the vast experience that he brought. And he really, really wanted to learn. And that's the other thing I think I probably need to say is that the difference between university students and apprentices, in my experience, and I can only speak for my experience, is that the apprentices really want to be there. Now, a lot of university students want to be there too, but the apprentices really, really, really wanted it, and it was like their dream, and they never thought that they would get to a point where they were attending university and getting a qualification.
Yeah.
And that is just such a fantastic feeling for a lecturer because the people in the room want to be there.
I think that's so true. I think I remember getting my offer for my apprenticeship on my birthday.
Was it your birthday?
It's my 18th birthday, and I was over the moon. I was so, so happy. I went out, I celebrated with a cocktail, and I was over the moon. And you do really want to be there because they're so unbelievably competitive and they have so many benefits. And once you realise that, you go, oh my God, why isn't everyone doing this?
I think that they aren't for everybody, but I think if you find an area that you feel really, really interested and passionate about, I think an apprenticeship can change your life.
I mean, because it's changed mine completely.
It has completely changed your life. It hasn't changed you as a person, but it has completely changed your life. And I think that working and learning at the same time, although it's a massive challenge, brings two things together that perhaps university students don't come out with at the end of their 3 years.
Yeah, a lot of my friends personally are struggling to find grad schemes because you come out of university with the same degree as everyone else. 9 times out of 10, you haven't done your placement year, so you don't have any relevant work experience.
Yeah.
And then all the grad roles are oversaturated, and most of them have been given to the placement students in the first place that did really well. And now they're struggling to find jobs.
And I think that's true. For example, your younger sister, for example, would not, an apprenticeship would not have been for her.
No, not at all.
She knew what she wanted to do, and you have to do it through a university, and because of the
qualifications you need,
the qualifications and the professional qualifications you need. So again, for her, she's going through university, which for her is great because it's what she wants to do. But I think apprenticeships not well enough known. You know, when I was younger, it was very much, you know, you want to become an electrician or a plumber or a bricklayer. That's what you did. It's not like that at all these days, and all the better for it.
100%. I mean, there's so many apprenticeships now. You can do it in marketing, finance. The doctor apprenticeship has come out. The teacher apprenticeship is coming out. It's just, the list goes on and on, which I think is absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, absolutely.
So from being part of an apprenticeship scheme, what do you think is the one standout benefit of them?
The confidence and the knowledge that both working and learning give you to take on further through your career.
That's perfect. And the one last question.
Oh, go on. What?
If there is a young person out there who knows that university isn't for them and is thinking about an apprenticeship, what is one piece of advice you'd give them to work out if it's for them?
Go and find out as much as you can about it. And if you can't get that information from school, go online, because there's plenty of information out there. But you're in a better position to be able to point them to the right people rather than me.
But research is so important. It's what we did.
And it's the only thing we did. And we just went to find out and have chats with people.
Exactly. And then you learn from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it all worked out for the best.
Worked out beautifully, darling.
Well, thank you very much for coming.
Oh, and thank you for having me. I'm so pleased to be here. And I have to say, I'm so, so proud of you, Gracie.
I'll cry.
Pull yourself together, darling.
Thank you. Well, thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.